They say that there's something which motivates a human being more than anything else. Would you like to guess what it is? If you've guessed money, you're wrong. Although my in-laws, from the house of Mumbi, may want to argue with that. Anyway, I'm talking about something called fear. And on our show today, we are going to try and make sense of what is happening all over the world. Because actually, if you look at it closer, it doesn't make any sense. Okay? And then we have something very interesting. A follow-up of what happened recently, mashinani, in a place called Kilifi in Kenya, which I assure you is super interesting. Maybe it'll also make you angry. But it's interesting. But first, let us look and analyze at what everybody in Kenya is talking about right now. And indeed, they're talking about it with a lot of fear. And I'm sure you've already guessed what it is. Total lockdown. Now, very credible information has it that the government of Kenya is very seriously considering a total lockdown of 4 counties within the country. These are the 4 counties that have emerged statistically as the high-risk counties for the ongoing scourge. They are, of course, Nairobi, Mombasa, Kwale, and Kilifi. Now, very interesting, you'll notice that the last 3 counties, Kilifi, Mombasa, and Kwale, are neighbors. They're all in the coastal area of Kenya. They all border the Indian Ocean. But what I find very interesting are the remarks of the Mombasa Deputy Governor yesterday, Bwana William Kingi, where he said that even the cases that have emerged in neighboring counties are of people who actually live in Mombasa. Actually, the coordination of the government of Mombasa is admirable in this crisis. Mombasa residents are very lucky to have Governor Ali Hassan Joho as their governor at a time like this. And I'll come back to this issue of decision making over this crisis a little later in this show. Then you'll understand what I'm saying. But in a nutshell, Joho is the best example of a governor who is balancing the crisis and the actual life on the ground of the vast majority of his county residents. A very good example is the ferry, the Likoni ferry, which ferries roughly 320,000 people daily. And these people are usually huddled together, very close to each other, no social distance. And there's been a lot of pressure to completely shut down the ferries, to stop any crossing between Mombasa Island and Likoni in South Coast, which I'm informed the governor has strongly resisted, and instead he has taken measures right from day one. As we speak, there are taps, facilities for washing on both sides of the channel. And now the latest is that nobody with flu-like symptoms will be allowed into the ferry. Now, I'm fully aware that many will say that is not enough, that this thing has to be stopped at all costs. Therefore, shut down the ferries. And of course, the first people to speak like this are seated in some comfortable apartment, air-conditioned, with food supplies for 2 years. Somewhere. They are not on the ground. They don't know what it means to the local person for the ferry service to be completely shut down. It is widely known that the governor is not for total shutdown. However, this is a decision that if it is made, will be made from national level. Now, in my view, if you must have a complete lockdown, it makes sense to have it somewhere like Mombasa. But it would hardly make sense to stretch the same into Kilifi and Kwale. Why? Because those two counties are, for all intents and purposes, rural counties. Apart from Malindi, the biggest town in Kilifi, and Diani in the south coast, it would not make sense to lock down huge tracts of rural land. Mombasa, of course, is a different story. Very huge population in a very small area. Buildings and residents very close to each other. And I'm, of course, emphasizing on Mombasa Island, because the county stretches well beyond the island. And Mombasa is similar in some ways to Nairobi, the capital of Kenya. Now, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the lockdown is within Kinshasa, the capital of the country. And it does not extend to the rest of the country. Anyway, many Kenyans are aware of the fact that if indeed there's a lockdown in Kenya, Nairobi will have to be first. Nairobi cannot escape it. And this terrifies very many Nairobi residents. Quite often in this life, we are faced with what I call a terrible decision. That is, whatever side of the coin, or whatever option you take, you will still have serious consequences. And a lockdown is a good example of this. If you don't lock down, there'll be serious consequences. This thing will spread, and our health facilities are not anywhere near being able to even cope. And so, of course, it makes perfect sense to have a complete lockdown. However, if you take this decision, there are other much more serious consequences that could emerge. You're touching on people's livelihoods. How they're able to put food on the table. And we know in our country, the vast majority of people, including the middle class, live from hand to mouth. So you'll have a serious food problem. Maybe even some people starve. And then you'll have another very serious problem. And it's called crime, looting, burglary, and even robbery with violence. That's just human nature. Because when people get hungry, when people can't find enough food to eat and have no way of finding food, it is pretty dangerous. And so in my view, those who have to make this decision have to decide which one of the two options will result in the most casualties. Or rather, which of the two options have the potential of resulting in the largest number of casualties. And then you take the other option. Granted, all human beings are the same. But China is not Africa. In fact, even the West, where there are lockdowns going on, is not the same with Africa. In the West, they have very efficient response mechanisms. In Kenya, about 2 decades ago, some violent people were trying to break into the home of this couple. And when the couple called the police, guess what they were told? Hatuna petroli. They had the vehicle to respond to their distress. But that vehicle did not have any fuel. Now, of course, mercifully, things have improved. But then, our security apparatus cannot be stretched. So if there are too many cases somewhere, there could be a problem. There is no way we can compare ourselves to a country like China. Very huge with very many people. But they've been preparing for decades. And indeed, they're always prepared and programmed and wired for mass unrest. And so their lockdown was brutally efficient. And where they were thin on numbers, we saw what happened. via those online videos. They welded the front doors of people firmly shut so that those people could not get out, even if they wanted to. Our security system in Kenya is good, and it has been improved dramatically in recent years. However, it comes nowhere near to that of China. And so all these are considerations that have to be taken into account. Because there's a problem when you put medical people in charge and you leave all the decision making to them because they don't know much about security. They don't know much about the other possible consequences. And this balancing act between medical people and the other decision makers is a tricky one. But in my opinion, Mombasa has done an excellent job. I think at the end of the day, what you need is a leader who understands what kind of life the common man goes through. And unfortunately, if I can be honest, unfortunately in Kenya, we don't have many leaders with that qualification. Joy is one of them, Lucky Mombasa. In the past, understanding what the local man goes through has not been critical. But in our situation today, it is extremely important. Because the vast majority are ordinary people. And in the kind of crisis we are faced with, unprecedented, it is very easy for things to flare up at short notice. People are scared, people are tense, people are worried. That is a dangerous situation. Whichever way you want to look at it. I pray that Almighty God will guide them to make the right decision. Now, I started the show today talking about fear as a very dangerous motivating factor. Because fear can blind you so that you don't see a bigger danger than the one you're trying to mitigate. Economists all over the world are telling us that we have already entered a very serious economic depression. The kind of depression that the world has never, ever faced before. Take careful note of the fact that I've said it is here already. I've not said it is coming. All over the world, massive layoffs. Factories shut down, no longer producing. And we all know that we live in a very tiny village where we depend on each other. Actually, economists tell us the major problem is the world depends too much on a country called China. And so what this means is that even when this crisis is finally over, we will all need to prepare for another crisis, and unfortunately, a much more serious crisis, an economic one. Some economists are saying that the decisions taken by very many countries to lock down did not take into consideration the economics and the possible consequences, which will be much more lethal and have many more casualties than this thing we're trying to fight. Because statistically, the fear that has gripped the world does not make sense. Because how many people are killed by other things? Malaria, other diseases, cancer, armed robbery, etc., etc. Then compare those figures to the figures that this scourge has so far been responsible in taking. And even if those figures are multiplied many times, they'll still not reach some of the world's leading killers, some of which will come into play as a result of lockdowns the world over. Folks, it is clear that we live in very perplexing times, where too many things don't make any sense. Now on to the Kilifi manenos I mentioned at the beginning of the show. Now, many residents in Kilifi are seething with rage. Why? Because they believe the huge numbers of people in the county who have had to go into quarantine have all ended up like that just because of one irresponsible individual who happens to be a leader in their county. And they have a point, because considering the times we live in, even if you have not traveled from outside the country, the activities of the said leader is said to have had a nyamachoma session with an OCS in Kilifi. Now, how many people would an OCS come into close contact with? Just do the math. Including officers at his own police station. And of course, the whole lot have to go into quarantine. Now, of course, people behave in a strange way when they're struck by fear. Fear of death. I remember in the 80s, when the HIV/AIDS thing came up for the first time, there was this man, who on testing positive, went and withdrew all his money from his bank account. And it was a very large amount. And then he focused on trying to get cozy with as many women as he could. Sitakufa peke yangu. What? Human beings can really be evil. But in the case of the current crisis we are facing, I will quote the words of Health CS Mutahi Kagwe in one of his very first press conferences. He said, this thing is not a death sentence. And he was absolutely correct. Look at the statistics. Some people have recovered. In fact, the vast majority of people have recovered. Africa has been miraculously saved by Almighty God. Because if you look at the figures of those who have succumbed on the entire continent, and even those who have been found positive, it is just amazing. And it is clear, that some people in the West are not happy about this. They are livid. Why are these Africans not dying? There's no way these figures can be correct. Those Africans are hiding. This cannot be true. We expect many, many of them to die, tons of them. Their health facilities are terrible. Therefore, very many of them should die. If it is not like that, then these figures are wrong. Humans can really be evil. Well, just to make it clear to such people, we live in Africa. And even if it is true governments sometimes hide, death is not an easy thing to hide. We would have noticed. We would have had relatives. We would have had relatives of relatives. But so far, it has not been like what some people want it to be. And we'll continue praying. And all of us out there, let us be super careful. Let us follow the directions of our governments and of health experts. Let us not argue with them or second guess them. We'll sort them out later after this crisis is over. Until next time, this is Chris Kumekucha reporting from bang in the middle of Africa, the continent.